Picture this. The most prestigious combat academy in the galaxy, perched on a planet so perfect it makes a vacation brochure look like a mugshot. Zelthara Prime, where the grass is literally emerald green, the sky shifts through 17 different shades of purple throughout the day, and the air smells like vanilla and success. Yeah, it's one of those places. The Galactic Combat Academy, where the galaxy's finest young warriors come to learn the ancient arts of kicking ass with style and sophistication. And by finest I mean the kind of aliens whose parents donate enough credits to build their own wing of the academy. You know the type. Walking through those pristine crystal corridors, you'd see them all strutting around like they own the place. Which, let's be honest, they probably do. There's Corvin, a 7-foot-tall silicoid who looks like someone crossed a diamond chandelier with an attitude problem. Every step he takes sounds like wind chimes in a hurricane, and he never lets you forget that his species evolved from literal precious stones. Because apparently that makes you better at fighting. Sure it does, Sparkles. Then there's Zilp, this nervous jellyfish-looking Aquarian, who floats around in a mobility suit filled with his home planet's special brine. Kid's got more anxiety than a caffeinated chihuahua, but his dad happens to be the Aquarian ambassador to the Galactic Council. Nepotism at its finest, folks. And let's not forget the crown jewel of this circus. Instructor Vextalon. 8 feet of pure Krathari muscle, 4 arms that he uses mostly for dramatic gesturing, and an ego so big it has its own gravitational field. This guy walks into a room like he's expecting a parade, and honestly, on this planet he probably gets one. The Krathari are famous throughout the galaxy for their warrior culture, which basically means they've turned the art of looking intimidating into a religion. But here's where it gets interesting. Sitting in the back corner of advanced combat theory, doodling in a beat-up notebook, is Maya Rodriguez, human, from Earth. You know that little blue-green rock that most of the galaxy still thinks is a myth, or at best, some kind of cosmic joke. Maya's about 5'6", which makes her a midget by galactic standards. She's got dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, brown eyes that seem to notice everything, and the kind of calm expression that either means she's completely zen or planning 17 different ways to end you. She wears the standard academy uniform like everyone else, except hers actually looks lived in instead of fresh from the designers of Fashionable Fighting Gear Incorporated. The thing about Maya is, she doesn't look like much. In a room full of crystalline beings who could bench press a small moon and warrior species that consider morning calisthenics to be full contact combat, she's about as noticeable as a whisper in a thunderstorm, which is exactly how she likes it. See, Maya's what the galactic community politely calls a Deathworlder. Her planet is classified as a Class X-12 world, which means that according to galactic standards, Earth is basically a horror movie that never ends. Predators, natural disasters, toxic atmosphere, unstable weather patterns, and a gravity well that would crush most civilized species into paste. The fact that anything intelligent evolved there at all is considered either a miracle or a cosmic clerical error. Most of the academy treats her like an exotic pet. Oh look, the little Deathworlder can use utensils. How adorable that she doesn't immediately try to eat her classmates. Isn't it cute how she doesn't even have natural armor or venom glands or the ability to photosynthesize her own nutrients? But here's what makes it really rich. Maya Rodriguez didn't get into the Galactic Combat Academy because Daddy wrote a check, or because her species has a reputation for being warrior poets, or crystal-brained tactical geniuses. She got in because she scored perfect marks on every single entrance exam they threw at her. Combat theory, tactical analysis, weapons proficiency, survival scenarios, psychological warfare, and about 15 other tests designed to weed out anyone who wasn't completely serious about the art of organized violence. The admissions board probably thought it was a computer error. A human, from a planet most of them had never heard of, outscoring candidates from species that had been perfecting warfare since before Earth's sun was even a twinkle in a nebula's eye. And now here she sits, in the back of the classroom, while Instructor Vextalon prepares to begin another thrilling lecture on the refined art of combat. Because apparently, when you've got 4 arms and biceps the size of small vehicles, everything you do is automatically refined. Vextalon strides to the front of the combat hall like he's entering the gladiatorial arena on his home planet. All 4 arms spread wide in what I can only assume is meant to be an inspiring gesture, but mostly just looks like he's trying to hug the entire room to death. Students, he booms, his voice echoing off the crystalline walls. Today we delve deeper into the sacred art of refined warfare. Not the crude brawling of primitive species, but the elegant dance of civilized combat. Oh, here we go. The sacred art speech. I swear this guy could make ordering lunch sound like a religious experience. Maya, still in the back row, continues her doodling. From this angle it looks like she's sketching geometric patterns, but if you look closer you might notice they bear a striking resemblance to anatomical weak points of various species. Not that anyone's looking closer, because why would they pay attention to the Deathworlder? Observe, Vextalon continues, launching into his standard demonstration routine. He moves through a series of elaborate combat forms that look like someone crossed ballet with a very aggressive game of pat a cake. The Krathari's seven-fold strike. Each movement flows into the next, creating a symphony of martial prowess. Zilp, our friendly neighborhood nervous jellyfish, watches from his mobility tank with what passes for rapt attention among the Aquarians. Instructor Vextalon, sir, he bubbles, his translator making his voice sound like he's permanently asking a question. The fluidity is quite impressive, very oceanic in its approach. Indeed, young Zilp, Vextalon replies, somehow managing to make his approval sound condescending. Your species may lack solid bone structure, but you understand the flow of proper combat. Corvin, meanwhile, is practicing his own combat forms in the corner, his crystalline body refracting the light into prismatic patterns across the floor. Every movement creates a soft chiming sound, like someone's playing a very aggressive xylophone. The geometric precision is adequate, he announces, because apparently Corvin never learned to give compliments without backhanded qualifiers. Though it lacks the mathematical perfection of silicoid combat theory. And then there's Threx. Oh, Threx. This guy's about as wide as he is tall, covered in what looks like brown fur but is actually some kind of environmental adaptation that makes him basically a walking carpet with a philosophy degree. He's from a high-gravity world, which means he could probably bench press the Academy's main building, but he spends most of his time reading poetry and discussing the deeper meaning of violence. The beauty of combat, Threx rumbles in his bass-heavy voice, is not in the destruction but in the understanding of one's place in the cosmic dance of survival. Precisely, Threx, Vextalon nods sagely. The Ursoids have always understood the spiritual aspect of warfare. Maya glances up from her notebook just long enough to catch Threx's eye. The big guy gives her the tiniest nod, like he's acknowledging something the others are missing. Then she goes back to her sketching. Now, Vextalon announces, we shall practice the flowing river technique. Zilp, demonstrate the opening sequence. Zilp nervously floats forward in his tank, his tentacles moving in what's supposed to be a graceful combat flow but looks more like an underwater interpretive dance about social anxiety. Like this, sir? I think I might be doing the third movement wrong. Acceptable, Vextalon says, which in instructor speak means barely adequate, but I don't want to crush your spirit completely. Corvin, your turn. Corvin steps forward with the confidence of someone whose species literally cannot be humble. His combat routine is all sharp angles and geometric precision. Each movement creating little light shows as his crystalline surface catches and redirects the Academy's artificial sunlight. It's actually pretty impressive, if you can get past the fact that he looks like a living disco ball having an identity crisis. The 47th sequence could use refinement, Corvin critiques himself, because of course he does, but the overall mathematical flow approaches optimal efficiency. Very good, Vextalon beams. The silicoid precision is legendary throughout the galaxy. Threx goes next, and his combat form is like watching a mountain decide to become a dancer. Every movement is deliberate, powerful, and somehow philosophical. He makes it look less like fighting and more like he's having a deep conversation with the universe about the nature of conflict. Beautiful, Threx. Vextalon nods approvingly. The Ursoid integration of mind and body is truly remarkable. And through all of this, Maya sits in the back, occasionally glancing up but mostly focused on her notebook. Her pen moves steadily across the page, sketching, making notes, completely absorbed in whatever she's working on. The other students steal glances at her occasionally, but not the kind of glances you give to someone you're curious about. More like the glances you give to furniture that might be slightly out of place but isn't worth moving. Vextalon, meanwhile, is building up to something. You can tell because he's starting to gesture more dramatically, and his voice is taking on that particular tone that educators use when they're about to make what they think is a profound point. You see, my students, he says, all four arms now moving in synchronized arcs. This is what separates the civilized species from the primitive. We do not simply fight, we elevate combat to an art form. We bring sophistication to what others consider mere violence. Maya's pen stops moving. She looks up for just a moment, makes eye contact with Vextalon, then goes back to her notebook. But there's something different about her expression now, something that looks almost like amusement. And that's when Vextalon makes his first mistake. He notices Maya's little smile. Ah, he says, his voice dripping with the kind of patronizing tone that could make a saint throw a punch. Perhaps our exchange student has something to contribute to the discussion. The entire class turns to look at Maya, who glances up from her notebook with the expression of someone who was just asked to explain why water is wet. Not particularly, she says simply, then goes back to her sketching. Oh, but Vextalon is not having that. You can practically see his ego inflating like a balloon at a birthday party. Come now, Maya Rodriguez of Earth. He pronounces her name like he's announcing the arrival of a particularly exotic zoo animal. Surely you have observations about our refined combat techniques. Maya looks up again, pen still in hand. They're very choreographed, she says diplomatically. Choreographed. Vextalon laughs, and it's the kind of laugh that doesn't actually indicate amusement so much as barely contains superiority. Yes, I suppose to someone from a primitive world, the sophisticated art of combat might appear to be mere choreography. Corvin makes a sound like crystal wind chimes having a mild seizure, which is apparently how silicoids chuckle. The comparison is apt, Instructor. The untrained eye cannot distinguish between performance and precision. Indeed. Vextalon nods sagely. Perhaps the primitive human would benefit from observing how real warriors conduct themselves in combat. Maya's pen pauses for just a fraction of a second. I'm observing, she says quietly. Excellent. Vextalon beams, completely missing the undertone in her voice. It is always beneficial when the less experienced can learn from their betters. Zilp shifts uncomfortably in his tank, his tentacles twitching in what might be the Aquarian equivalent of a nervous cough. Instructor, perhaps we should continue with the lesson. But Vextalon is on a roll now. You know that feeling when someone gets a little bit of power and it goes straight to their head like cheap wine. That's what's happening here. Except Vextalon started with an ego the size of a small moon and it's currently expanding to planetary proportions. No, Zilp. He waves one of his four hands dismissively. This is an important teaching moment. You see, students, the galaxy is filled with species who believe that crude violence is equivalent to sophisticated combat. He begins pacing, his massive frame moving with the kind of theatrical flair that suggests he's practiced this speech in front of a mirror. They mistake brutality for strength, aggression for skill. They have not learned as we have that true combat is an art form. Maya continues her sketching, but now she's occasionally glancing up to watch Vextalon's movements. Her eyes track his stride pattern, the way he distributes his weight, how he gestures with his arms. It's the kind of observation that looks casual but really isn't. Take for instance, the so-called combat of Deathworld species. Vextalon continues, warming to his theme. Crude, unrefined, lacking in any sense of style or proper technique. They fight like animals, because they come from worlds that are essentially extended survival scenarios. Threx shifts uncomfortably in his seat, his massive bulk making the reinforced furniture creak. Instructor, he rumbles diplomatically, survival often requires pragmatic approaches to conflict. But that is precisely my point, dear Threx. Vextalon exclaims, gesturing grandly. We have evolved beyond mere survival. We have elevated combat to something beautiful, something worthy of study and admiration. Corvin's crystalline structure catches the light as he nods in agreement. The mathematical precision of our techniques represents centuries of refinement and improvement. Exactly. Vextalon points at Corvin with two of his arms simultaneously. Precision, refinement, mathematical perfection. These are the hallmarks of civilized warfare. Maya looks up from her notebook again, and this time there's definitely amusement in her expression. What happens when precision meets improvisation? She asks. The question hangs in the air for a moment, and you can practically see Vextalon's brain trying to process whether this is a genuine question or some kind of challenge. Being the kind of instructor who assumes every question is really just a student begging for more of his wisdom, he goes with the first option. An excellent question, he booms. Improvisation is the refuge of the unprepared. When one has mastered the proper techniques, improvisation becomes unnecessary. Precision will always triumph over chaos. Always, Maya asks, and there's something in her tone that should probably be setting off alarm bells in anyone with half a brain. Always, Vextalon confirms with absolute certainty. Proper technique, refined form, mathematical precision. These are the tools of the superior warrior. Maya nods thoughtfully and makes another note in her book. That's interesting, she says. I'm so glad you find our methods interesting, Vextalon replies, his voice practically dripping with condescension. Perhaps you would benefit from some personal instruction in the proper ways of combat. And there it is, the challenge, wrapped up in the kind of fake concern that makes you want to throw things at walls. Maya looks up from her notebook, meets Vextalon's gaze directly, and for just a moment, something passes between them that makes the temperature in the room drop about 5 degrees. That could be educational, Maya says simply. Wonderful, Vextalon claps his hands together, all four of them, creating a sound like a small thunderclap. Class, gather around. We're about to witness a demonstration of proper combat technique. The other students form a loose circle around the combat mat, which is this fancy piece of technology that can adjust its surface tension and grip based on the needs of different species. Right now it's set to standard academy settings, which means it's basically the perfect fighting surface for someone who learned combat in a controlled environment. Maya closes her notebook with a soft snap and stands up. She doesn't stretch, doesn't crack her knuckles, doesn't do any of those pre-fight rituals that warriors supposedly do. She just stands there looking like someone who was asked to help move a piece of furniture. Now then, Vextalon announces to the assembled class, I want everyone to observe carefully. This will be an instructional demonstration of how proper technique handles, shall we say, unrefined approaches to combat. He steps onto the mat with the kind of flourish that suggests he's done this exact demonstration about 100 times before. All four arms spread wide, his stance perfect according to whatever Krathari combat manual he learned from, every muscle positioned just so. He looks like a statue titled Warrior in his prime that some art student spent way too much time on. I will of course restrain myself appropriately. He continues, addressing Maya but really performing for his audience. Perhaps we'll limit this to 2 arms, keep the power level to something manageable. We wouldn't want any unfortunate accidents. Maya steps onto the mat, no ceremony, no dramatic positioning, just a human being standing on a piece of advanced technology like she's waiting for a bus. How generous, she says, and there's something in her tone that makes Threx lean forward slightly in his seat. Oh, I insist, Vextalon replies graciously. It would hardly be fair otherwise. After all, this is meant to be educational, not overwhelming. Zilp's tentacles are twitching more nervously than usual. Instructor, maybe we should, perhaps review the safety protocols first. Nonsense, young Zilp. Vextalon waves him off with one arm while keeping the other 3 in perfect combat position. This is a controlled demonstration. Besides, our human friend here will benefit greatly from experiencing proper combat technique firsthand. Corvin's crystalline form shifts slightly, creating small chiming sounds. The educational value should be significant. Observing the difference between refined technique and primitive improvisation, Maya looks around the circle of students, her gaze lingering for just a moment on each face. Zilp looks worried, Corvin looks smugly anticipatory. Threx looks thoughtful, like he's seeing something the others are missing. Any particular rules for this educational demonstration? Maya asks. Standard academy safety protocols, of course. Vextalon replies magnanimously. Combat ends when one participant yields or is unable to continue. Though I suspect this will be quite brief. Brief, Maya repeats, nodding slowly. Yeah, I think you're right about that. She rolls her shoulders once, a movement so subtle it barely registers, then settles into what can only generously be called a combat stance. If Vextalon's position looks like it was designed by a committee of warrior poets, Maya's looks like she's standing in line at a grocery store, feet shoulder-width apart, hands loose at her sides, weight evenly distributed. It's so unremarkable it's almost insulting. Interesting stance, Vextalon observes with the tone of someone critiquing a child's artwork. Very relaxed. I suppose when one lacks formal training, one makes do with whatever feels natural, something like that. Maya agrees. Vextalon begins moving through what looks like a warm-up routine, except it's clearly designed more for show than function. All 4 arms flowing through elaborate patterns, his massive frame shifting from position to position with theatrical precision. It's actually quite impressive, if you're into that sort of thing. Observe class, he calls out while moving through his routine, the importance of proper form. Each movement serves multiple purposes: offense, defense, and the maintenance of optimal positioning. Maya watches him move, her head tilting slightly as she tracks his patterns. Her expression is completely neutral, like she's watching someone demonstrate how to fold laundry. The beauty of refined combat, Vextalon continues, settling into his opening stance, is that it elevates mere violence into something approaching art. That's one way to look at it, Maya says quietly. The combat mat's surface indicators light up, signaling that both participants are in position and the demonstration can begin. Around the circle, the students lean forward slightly, anticipating what they assume will be a quick and educational beatdown. Vextalon assumes his full combat position, all 4 arms positioned according to classical Krathari doctrine, his 8-foot frame radiating controlled power and absolute confidence. He looks like every warrior statue ever carved, if warrior statues could smirk. Maya just stands there, hands still at her sides, looking like the least threatening thing in the room. Ready when you are, she says, and that's when Vextalon makes his second mistake. He assumes that because she looks unprepared, she actually is unprepared. Second one. Vextalon launches into his opening attack. A classic Krethari 4-point assault that he's probably practiced 10,000 times. It's textbook perfect, mathematically precise, and completely telegraphed to anyone who's been watching him show off for the past 20 minutes. All 4 arms moving in coordinated strikes, designed to overwhelm through superior positioning and technique. Maya moves, not the elaborate dance of civilized combat, not the flowing movements of refined warfare. She simply steps forward, and to the left, a movement so economical it barely looks like she's trying. Vextalon's first strike passes through empty air where she was standing a fraction of a second ago. Second 2. Vextalon adjusts, because he's a trained warrior, and this is what trained warriors do. His second and third arms sweep toward Maya's new position in a textbook defensive recovery that should have caught her in a counter trap. Except Maya isn't where his textbook says she should be. She's somehow moved again, this time ducking under his sweeping arms while stepping closer instead of backing away, which is exactly the opposite of what any sane person should do when facing a 4-armed giant. The look on Vextalon's face suggests he's starting to realize this isn't going according to the script. Second 3. Maya's hand snaps up and catches Vextalon's lowest right arm at the wrist. Not a grab, exactly, more like she's gently redirecting its momentum. Except the redirection sends his arm into the path of his upper left arm, and suddenly 2 of his 4 limbs are tangled up with each other. Vextalon tries to compensate with his remaining arms, but Maya is already moving again, flowing around his right side like water around a rock. The crowd of students is starting to lean forward, because this isn't looking like the educational beatdown they were expecting. Second 4. This is where things get interesting. Maya doesn't try to match Vextalon's strength, because that would be stupid. Instead, she does something that apparently never occurred to the refined combat theorists of the galaxy. She uses his own momentum against him. Vextalon throws a devastating right cross with his upper arm, the kind of punch that could probably dent steel. Maya steps into it, catches his wrist, and pivots. Suddenly all that devastating force is being redirected toward the mat at a very unflattering angle. The sound Vextalon makes is somewhere between a roar of rage and a yelp of surprise. Second 5. Vextalon is off balance now, which is a problem when you're an 8-foot-tall warrior who's used to being the most stable thing in any room. He tries to recover by planting his feet and using his superior reach to create distance. Maya doesn't let him create distance. She stays close, uncomfortably close, moving in the kind of tight spaces where superior reach becomes a disadvantage instead of an asset. Her elbow finds the nerve cluster just below his rib cage, and Vextalon's breathing hitches. Around the circle, Zilp's tentacles have gone completely still. Corvin has stopped chiming. Even Threx is sitting up straighter. Second 6. Vextalon tries to grab Maya with his free arms, because if refined technique isn't working, maybe brute force will. This turns out to be mistake number 3, because grabbing someone requires you to know where they're going to be, and Maya apparently didn't read the same tactical manuals as everyone else. She slips his grab, steps behind his right leg, and does something with her hip that sends all 8 feet of trained Krethari warriors stumbling forward. It's not a throw, exactly, more like she's suggesting that gravity might want to do its job. Second 7. Vextalon catches himself before he falls, because he's still a trained warrior even if nothing is going the way it's supposed to. He spins around to face Maya, all 4 arms spread wide to prevent her from getting close again. Except she's not trying to get close. She's standing just outside his reach, perfectly balanced, looking like she's waiting for something. The expression on her face is still completely neutral, like she's watching paint dry. Impossible, Corvin whispers, his crystalline voice barely audible. Second 8. Vextalon charges. Not a refined attack, not a mathematically precise assault, just a big angry alien, trying to use his size and strength to end this embarrassing situation. All 4 arms reaching for Maya, his massive frame moving faster than something his size should be able to move. Maya waits until the last possible moment, then drops into a crouch, and sweeps his legs. Except it's not really a sweep so much as a gentle suggestion that his ankles might want to reconsider their current trajectory. Vextalon goes down like a felled tree, all 8 feet, and 4 arms of him, landing on the combat mat with a sound like a small building collapsing. Second 9. Maya stands up, brushes an imaginary speck of dust off her uniform, and looks down at Vextalon, who is currently staring at the ceiling, with the expression of someone trying to figure out what just happened to his life. Good demonstration, she says politely, very educational. The silence in the combat hall is so complete you could hear a pin drop on a different planet. Vextalon blinks slowly, still flat on his back, trying to process how he went from confident instructor to horizontal disaster in less time than it takes to tie a shoe. Maya walks back to her seat, picks up her notebook, and sits down like nothing happened. She opens to a fresh page, and starts sketching again, completely ignoring the fact that she just deconstructed the Academy's top combat instructor in front of his entire class. After a long moment, Vextalon sits up slowly, shaking his head like he's trying to clear it. He looks around the circle of students, all of whom are staring at him with expressions ranging from shock to barely concealed amusement. He starts, then stops, apparently unable to find words that adequately describe what just happened to him. 9 seconds. Threx rumbles helpfully. I was counting. Maya doesn't look up from her notebook, but there might be the tiniest hint of a smile at the corner of her mouth. It takes Vextalon about 3 full minutes to get back on his feet, which is approximately 18 times longer than it took Maya to put him there. He stands up slowly, testing each limb like he's not entirely sure they're still attached properly. The look on his face suggests he's having a serious philosophical crisis about the nature of reality. He starts then stops, apparently discovering that his vocabulary doesn't include words for what just happened to him. A very informative demonstration. Threx offers diplomatically, though there's definitely amusement in his deep voice. Quite educational. Educational. Vextalon repeats slowly, like he's testing the word to see if it still means what he thinks it means. Maya continues sketching in her notebook, completely absorbed in whatever she's working on. The rest of the class is staring at her like she just performed actual magic, which from their perspective, she basically did. Zilp is the first one to break the stunned silence. Maya. He bubbles nervously, his tentacles twitching with what might be excitement or terror. Could you, maybe explain how you did that thing with the redirecting of the momentum? Maya looks up from her notebook with the expression of someone who's just been asked to explain why water is wet. Physics, she says simply. Force equals mass times acceleration. If you redirect the acceleration, you redirect the force. But the technique, Corvin chimes, his crystalline voice higher than usual. Where did you learn such unorthodox methods? Earth, Maya replies. Like that explains everything. Which, honestly, it kind of does. Vextalon finally manages to collect himself enough to speak in complete sentences. That was not what I expected, he admits. And to his credit, he doesn't sound angry so much as completely bewildered. You telegraphed your attacks, Maya explains, not unkindly. The 4-point assault is very pretty, but you spend about 2 seconds setting up each strike. That's enough time to make coffee and read a short story. Telegraphed. Vextalon looks genuinely confused. You broadcast your intentions. Maya clarifies. Your stance, your breathing, your eye movement, the way you shift your weight. It's like watching someone announce their plans through a loudspeaker. Threx leans forward, clearly interested. And this is standard combat training on your world. Maya shrugs. More or less. When everything on your planet is trying to kill you, you learn to be efficient. Fancy moves are great for demonstrations, but they don't help much when you're being charged by something that weighs 3 tons and has really sharp teeth. 3 tons. Zilp squeaks. Oh, that's just the medium-sized predators, Maya says casually. The big ones are closer to 8 or 9 tons. Really changes your perspective on combat theory. The silence that follows this statement is profound. You can practically hear the sound of worldviews crashing and burning. So when you fight, Corvin asks slowly, you're not trying to be elegant. I'm trying not to die, Maya replies, matter-of-factly. Everything else is optional. Vextalon is staring at her like she's just revealed the secrets of the universe. But the art of combat, the beauty of refined technique, still works, Maya says. It's just not the only way. You fight like someone who learned in a safe environment with rules and safety protocols. That's not bad, it's just different. Different how? Threx asks. Maya closes her notebook and stands up, moving to the center of the mat. Show me that 4-point assault again, she says to Vextalon. He hesitates, clearly wondering if this is going to end with him on the floor again. Slow motion, Maya adds. Just the form. Vextalon cautiously moves through his technique, all 4 arms flowing through the precise movements at about quarter speed. It really is quite beautiful, in its way. See how he's perfectly balanced at each stage, Maya points out to the class. Every movement flows into the next. Every position is mathematically optimal. It's actually very impressive. Vextalon looks pleased, despite himself. The problem is, Maya continues, it assumes your opponent is going to cooperate with your timing. In a real fight, cooperation is usually not on the menu. She demonstrates, moving through a simplified version of what she did during their 9-second encounter. Deathworld combat isn't prettier, or more elegant. It's just more practical. You use whatever works, and you don't waste time on anything that doesn't. Could you? Zilp starts nervously. Could you teach us some of these techniques? Maya looks around the circle of students, all of whom are now watching her with something approaching reverence. Even Corvin looks interested, though he's trying to hide it behind his usual crystalline superiority. I'm not really qualified to teach, Maya says. I'm just a student here. Same as you. But you just defeated Instructor Vextalon in 9 seconds. Threx points out. 9 seconds, Maya repeats thoughtfully. Honestly, I was expecting it to take longer. He's much stronger than anything I've fought before. The casual way she says this makes everyone in the room reconsider their assumptions about what constitutes a dangerous opponent. Vextalon clears his throat. Perhaps, he says carefully, we could explore some alternative approaches to combat theory, as an educational exchange. Maya looks at him with something approaching respect. That could be interesting. And that's how Maya Rodriguez, the quiet human from the little Deathworld that nobody had heard of, accidentally became the most popular combat instructor at the most prestigious academy in the galaxy. Not because she tried to show off or prove a point, but because she treated a 9-second dismantling of a 4-armed warrior as casually as she might discuss the weather. Her notebook, it turns out, was full of detailed anatomical sketches of every species in the class, complete with notes about optimal pressure points, joint vulnerabilities, and movement patterns. She'd been studying them all semester, not out of malice, but out of the kind of ingrained survival instinct that comes from growing up on a world where everything has teeth. Just in case, she explains when Threx asks about it later. You never know when information like that might be useful. The scary part isn't that she could take down any of them in seconds. The scary part is that she'd been prepared to do it from day one, while being perfectly friendly and polite the entire time. Because that's what you do when you come from a Deathworld. You smile, you make friends, and you quietly catalog every possible threat in the room. Not because you're paranoid, but because on Earth, the things that look harmless are usually the ones that kill you. And sometimes, just sometimes, the rest of the galaxy needs a reminder that there's a difference between civilized and soft.